everyone. Welcome to Books in the World. This is a production of the Cape Cod Writers Center, and I'm happy to say the Cape Cod Writers Center is in its 55th year, and Books in the World is the oldest continually produced literary cable TV show in the nation. And welcome. Today we have Brunonia Barry. Very excited. Welcome, Brunonia. How are you?
Madeline. I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Brunonia, you are the author of The Lace Reader and another book after that, The Map of the World. And I think many people read The Lace Reader and are probably at this moment saying, oh yes, I know her. I remember The Lace Reader. I think you just hit a chord with a theme and people and characters that just people love reading your books.
Well, that's wonderful to hear.
Well, speaking of which, the new book, The Fifth Petal, has been out just for a couple of months.
Since January 24th.
Yeah, it's right. You've gotten some great reviews, and I like to read one because it's almost nice to hear such good praise and everything. And this says, the superlative Barry creates a vividly eerie, time-bending landscape that stretches back and forth between the Salem witch trials, the goddess murderers, and the present-day mystery. This spooky, multi-layered medley of mysteries is sure to be a bestseller.
Oh, let's hope.
Let's hope. Well, I have to say Booklist is a reviewing journal that librarians read, and as people know that I was a librarian and I like to talk about librarians. So if you get a review, a good review in Booklist or Library Journal, you're golden. And if you don't, I don't know how you survive in libraries. So
well, libraries have been wonderful to me, especially with this book, actually.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. Well, Cape Cod is full of this book, the new book, The Fifth Petal. So this book is a mystical, psychological thriller. That's what,
yes.
I don't know whether I wrote that or whether you wrote it or one of the reviewers
quote
did.
You,
but
though.
I thought it was a very good way of summarizing a few things, mystical, psychological. I think I'd add historical to that, and probably a lot of other things that we'll get to talking about soon. But before we do, tell us a little about your background and how you came to write this book.
Well, I live in Salem, Massachusetts. And everybody has an idea, I think, of what that is like, particularly on Halloween, where our population grows from 42,000 to 300,000. So probably most of the people on the Cape have been to Salem at least once, maybe for Halloween. I don't highly recommend it, but.
Well, it sounds like Mardi Gras.
It is Mardi Gras without the nudity, we call it.
Yeah. I had no idea, frankly. I mean, I know about the Salem, the city of witches, and I go to the Peabody Essex Museum as often as I can.
Oh, wonderful place, yes.
But I've never been up there for Halloween. And
it's wild and crazy and wonderful, too. I mean, you have to like a party. We kind of stay on the other side of town where the trick-or-treating kids come. You know, I think we gave out 3,500 candy bars last year. So they come from all over.
3,500
yes.
candy bars, wow. Well, you said it goes on for about a month.
It does. Haunted Happenings is Salem's big festival, and it starts October 1st. And then people come from all over the world for the whole month, actually. Yeah. It's quite something.
There's something a little eerie about that, to use a word appropriate to the book, because they're celebrating this horrendous event. I mean, I'm not celebrating, but commemorating
well, yes, in a way,
the hanging of witches in 1692. And Halloween, I don't get anyway, I'm not a Halloween person. It's celebrating the death of the body, I guess.
It's an old, old pagan holiday, really.
Yeah.
The coming of winter and the harvest and all of that.
Yeah, yeah.
But Salem is kind of a town divided in a certain sense because, as you know, it's hard to be known for the dark history that we're known for. We'd love to be known for our Peabody Essex Museum. We have 5 libraries in town.
That is amazing.
And many other things, film festivals and lit fests and the Massachusetts Poetry Festival. So it's kind of hard to reconcile the two. You know, people come because of the dark history, but then we try to show them what else we have. But this story is actually about the polarity of opposites in Salem and how the town is a bit divided. And
So I know you said that you are descended from the original women who were
Yes.
hanged and accused of witchcraft.
Yes, Rebecca Nurse and two of her sisters were accused. One of her sisters was hanged, as well as Rebecca was, on, well, Rebecca was July 19th, and in this book I'm writing about kind of a backstory of the 5 women who were hanged on July 19th, 1692. My family goes back even farther than that in terms of they came over in 1628 with the governor to chart and acquire the Western Territory. So that's another story that I'll have to write at some point. But it's quite a history, and it's hard. We really live in history in Salem, and it's hard to get away from it, especially when the tourism, which rescued the town and supports the town, also reminds you of something you might rather forget.
Yeah, it's a very dreadful. So again, let's talk about your goals for writing this book, some of the moral quandaries that you cover.
Yes. Well, every Halloween we have people come to save the souls of the partiers. And every Halloween I get a little nervous about what might happen between the two groups of people, the revelers and the ones who don't think they should be partying. And it gets me nervous. Nothing ever happens, but it makes me wonder. And as I walk through town, I think, I wonder if the whole thing could happen again here at any point. And if so, and it would never happen the same way, of course. But if so, what would a modern day witch hunt look like in Salem? And that made me start thinking about what issues we do have. And so this book is really about what we do to people we consider other and how we torment them, and what it might look like with a modern person in Salem. In this case, Rose Whalen is one of the characters in the book. And Rose was a scholar of colonial history, and particularly the witch trials, and then was accused of a murder in 1989, and the town has blamed her since, so there is no evidence to convict her. But she had a mental breakdown and has lost her home and her friends and everything since. So Rose is the other in this story, and she inspired the story.
Do you have a quote there about this that you wanted to
I
share?
do. Thank you. This is a conversation that's going on actually about Rose and about history in Salem. And it says, and once you start demonizing groups of people, when you make them other, you can justify doing just about anything you want to them, can't you? Look at history if you don't believe me. That sort of sums up the book.
Well,
Sort of.
I was going to say, this book is rich. It's got history, it's got mythology, philosophy, music. What am I missing? A lot of things. Celtic mythology, the murders, the history of the witch trials. We're going to talk about the healing powers of music and sound at some point. The Wiccan culture, the current Wiccan culture.
Yes, it's a safe haven for Wiccans
Right.
and witches from all over the world.
So let's not confuse people. It is set in the modern day. It's 25 years after a murder. 5 women were murdered, so it's current.
Unsolved.
It's current history. It's current modern novel.
Yes.
Our heroine and hero, I guess, are young, and one's a police person, and the other is a young girl who was part of this horrendous
A
thing.
witness to the murder when she was young. Yes.
So, I mean, just to keep all your fans happy, we should say there are some people from the Lace Reader who are also in this book.
There are. My characters never quite leave, I think. So John Rafferty in The Lace Reader was a detective. He's now chief of police, a job he doesn't really love. He really came to Salem to get away from New York and wanted a simpler life, and what he found in Salem was anything but simple.
Yeah.
So that's him. And then he is now married to Towner Whitney, who was the protagonist in The Lace Reader. And then if you've read The Map of True Places, the psychologist in the map, Z. Finch, is also in this book.
Okay.
So it's a little community of characters that keep recurring.
Coming back.
Yes,
yeah,
they do.
Yeah.
They won't leave.
I found it very easy to read the book without remembering the details about the Lace Reader.
You don't need to.
You don't need to, but you will want to go back and read.
That's great.
Read that again, and the other book as well. It's just you always. I think as readers always want to know more about these characters.
That's great.
Do you get that question a lot as an author, what more are you going to do with this character?
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
I do. And sometimes I really do think I've finished their story, and then they just pop back into another story. And it's really surprising. But I do very long biographies. So I have an idea of their backstory before I start any novel, but particularly the new characters, the new protagonist and all of this, so that I have a pretty good idea who they are.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know exactly what they'll do in a situation, but I know where they've come from.
So you actually write a biography for
I do.
each person. I wanted to ask you a few questions about the process of writing your books, because this is the Cape Cod Writers Center, and I'm hoping that people who are listening will get some tips and ideas. So that's the first one. You write the biographies. Like you're a little girl and they were born to somebody, and they
Yes.
grew up, and
Yes.
where they were and what happened to them along the way.
It's true.
Yeah.
I even treat Salem as a character in the book and do a biography for Salem. And one of the questions I always ask my characters is, what does the character want and what's keeping them from getting it? And in the case of Salem, it's what does Salem want? Forgiveness. And what's keeping Salem from getting it? Tourism. So
Okay.
yeah, so that's the biography of Salem. That's much longer in a certain sense,
guess, yeah.
But I've done 30-page biographies on characters before I've started a novel, and then referred back to them, because if I get stuck somewhere and can't make a character do, or they won't do what I think they should, if I go back to the biography, I can usually figure out why. And I'm always wrong. They're not. So.
I love these conversations we get into with authors about how the characters are real and they speak
real.
to you, and they do. They have their own will, and they just sort of are guiding your hand or your
It
keyboard.
seems that way.
Yeah, it is very mystical.
It is. It is for me. And of course, I live in Salem, so everything's mystical.
Everything's mystical. You have a lot of material in this book.
Yes.
That is the story, the plot, the characters, but you also have deep citing of philosophical pieces that you've read and absorbed. Religion, Celtic mythology. You can maybe name other areas that you'd like to talk about. How do you keep all that straight when you're writing a book?
You had to ask me that.
I had to ask you that.
It's not easy. This book took 5 years, and the first 3 were really research. And I think I could have stayed, I'd still be doing it if I hadn't had a deadline. So, but I keep very, well, I have lists on my wall of my writing studio, and certainly dates are the hardest thing for me to keep straight. But I think the plot seems easy enough, but the detail and where to include a detail is the hardest part for me. But it manages to just sort of fall where it should, although my editor sometimes doesn't think that's true and will move something around, and she's very good at that. What I never know is where to begin a book. I always start it, and then it probably begins 50 to 60 pages later.
Okay.
So, and this is a long book, so you can imagine how long it really was.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, because I've heard some people say that they have to know where they're going when they write the first sentence, and not you.
No,
that doesn't work out that way.
I always know the end, which is odd, but I never quite know where it begins. And in this case, I thought Rose would be my main character. When I started. It started with a conversation with Rose and Rafferty in his courtyard, and they don't know each other, and she's sitting under his tree, and she says to him, if you could kill without consequence, would you do it? And he's taken aback and says, no, and she said, you're a liar. You've already done it. So that didn't all end up in the book per se, but it started me thinking about, what? Who is this woman?
Where did that quote come from?
It just was a question that...
If you can kill without consequence, would you
do it? And that runs through the book, of course, because Rose believes that she can. And but there's a whole story to that I won't go into.
No, don't go into it.
Give far too much away.
Yeah, this is certainly a story that you don't want to give too much away.
Right.
Which is it's sort of difficult in an interview because you do want to talk about Callie and you want to talk about Rafferty's wife, Towner, and you have a plot on Yellow Dog Island, a subplot, which is a place that probably people who know something about Salem have heard of and don't even know whether, I don't know, can you go there?
It's actually not real, but I've based the topography on Children's Island, which is a place that had a YMCA day camp that I worked at for years.
Is that off the coast?
That's off the coast of,
Salem?
it's owned by Salem and a little closer to Marblehead.
Okay.
But it is one of Salem's islands. All of the islands are Salem's.
I've got some Annisquam geography mixed up in my mind, I think. But anyway, that's interesting.
That's a great place.
So, about the sidebars, well, we can call them sidebars. I don't think you call them backstory. Backstory is the biography part that you're talking about. But the use of music for healing, the use of a trip to Italy to look at caves and religious monuments, the stories related to the banshees and what that really meant, the trees and the way trees communicate.
Yes, yes.
What does that do for you as a writer? How do you feel they side stories advance the plot?
I think they are the image system for me to write the story. And Rose believed that the trees saved her life the night of the murders. And so the trees play a very big part. And of course, a tree was used in the hangings in 1692 as well. So, so that ties in strongly too. But the trees and their communication, and there is a book, a rather new book out called The Hidden Life of Trees that I highly recommend. But I was using some of his articles for reference when I wrote this because the book wasn't out yet. But trees communicate through their root systems and fungi and will help each other if they need nutrients, and they help across. An oak could help an elm, for example, something like that. So the trees became a mirror for society in the way I wish it were. In the book. So that is, and this is kind of underground thing.
It's underground.
It is.
I'm starting to get a richer appreciation for the book as we talk about it, because it seems you can read the book, and as most people, you want to know what's happening, what's going to happen. And then you can look back and you can say, oh yes, the trees underground. I'm not going to say too much more about that because the plot leads you there, and I'm not sure I got that the first time.
Well, you know, in writing it, you don't always get why an image recurs, and then eventually you start to figure it out. So I think if you didn't, it's probably because I didn't right away either. So, but it's image systems for some reason run very strongly in my books. In the first book, it was lace and patterns in lace, and then the second it was celestial navigation and patterns and stars. Always patterns of some sort. Patterns. So,
I'm just thinking of another sort of character in the book is the house that Callie's boyfriend's family lived in.
Pride's Heart.
Pride's Heart, right away. The name is even interesting. Because Pride's Crossing is a place,
It
correct?
is Pride's Crossing. My grandmother lived in Pride's Crossing, and I was always fascinated by this tiny place that has, you know, quite a bit of history as well, and was part of Salem during the witch trials as well. So.
But this house has a basement. Why don't you describe it? Well.
There's a lot. There's a lot going on. Sort of under everything.
Under everything.
Under everything in the story.
Right.
And one of the things that Pride's Heart has is a spa, and in it is a what they call the sea well, which one of the characters, when he was younger, spent some time in, and he won't go near it anymore. So it's kind of interesting. But they use, when Callie does her healing treatments, which she's a sound healer and a music therapist, she uses the spa room because it's stone, and it has quartz in it, and it carries sound beautifully, as one of the singing bowls would. So there's something under the surface of everything in this book, and
very clever.
And even even the metaphor as above, so below, in the religious context, is the same thing. There's something that mirrors everything.
Well, we've probably kept the viewers in suspense for a while about the bowl, but since you've mentioned it, well, don't go away, anybody. We are going to get to that in a little more depth soon, but there is a bowl, the magic singing bowl and the healing bowl. It's a wonderful story, wonderful.
Thank you.
Just for a few minutes, talk about publishing this book, just to get off the mystical for a moment and back to the reality.
The practical.
Yeah,
Yes.
The practicalities
Yeah.
of, I bring up the subject of self-publishing, which I think you had some experience with.
Yes.
Because it's a very big thing now. As you may know, authors are facing that decision all the time.
And it can be a very good decision. I wouldn't recommend the way we did it. My husband and I self-published The Lace Reader. We always say emboldened by our ignorance at the time, because we were software publishers and we thought, oh, it must be very similar. And of course, it's not quite the same thing. This was back in 2007, so this is a long time ago. It was before ebooks were very popular, so we really had to print the books, and we did trade paperbacks and found a distributor and did quite well with it in that we got a starred review from Publishers Weekly, and then we ended up selling it to a much larger publisher because of that review and some other things that happened. So that was it was a lot of luck involved in that.
I would think getting a starred review in Publishers Weekly, you must have had a contact for getting that into
We hired a public relations company, and we hired an editor and an illustrator for the cover, and we did everything the way we would have with a software product. You know, I tested the book with book clubs, which was really, I think, a very good way to do it, because readers will tell you, you know, what works and what doesn't. And, and you have to really tell them to be brutal, because otherwise they'll be very polite and then just tell each other they didn't like this part or something. So they really were helpful. And my local independent bookstore was really helpful with that too, because they found me the readers to test with. So.
But now your publisher, you have a publisher, Crown. Well, Crown is an imprint, is that correct?
Of Random House.
Of Random House.
Penguin, yeah.
And I have to say, they did a beautiful job.
They did.
The printing is beautiful. The publisher, the cover. I think every author I know on Cape Cod who would salivate over this document. They put out a, it's kind of a combination press release, backgrounder, interview with you. It's just so professional and useful.
They did a wonderful job.
Yeah, very, very good. Are most of this interview, is this on your website?
I believe most of it is.
Yeah, I have to encourage people to look for this, because we've only barely touched the surface of the nice things that you have to say in this interview. And I really enjoyed reading your answers. There's sections on strong female characters, the historical research you did in Salem. It's all quite interesting, I really thought.
Thank you.
So I guess the bottom line is, if you're lucky enough to get a good publisher, you're really out there.
They did a wonderful job with this. And it all comes at once to you in pre-publication, and you're so overwhelmed that by the time the pub date hits, you can almost relax, because they've done all this. But I didn't know how I would ever make the deadlines they imposed on this, but I'm really glad they did, because I think these documents are
They're very useful. Speaking of deadlines, I know that your readers are waiting for your next book. So you have over 1,000 mentions on Goodreads.
Oh, that's great.
Really, people are really enjoying this book, as I know that people listening will enjoy it. So when are you coming out with your next books?
The next book is called Bone Lace.
Yeah. And
so it will have some of the same characters again. There's always a new protagonist, and it's always a standalone story. But that is, hopefully will come out in 2018.
Great.
And I think that's what we're aiming for. But then the tour takes a lot of time away from writing. So,
right.
So we'll have
good
to
luck
see.
in getting back to that. Now, before we go too much farther, we're going to demonstrate the singing bowl.
Okay.
And before we do that, would you like to read that part, or would you like me to read it?
Oh, would you like to?
I would like to read it
Okay.
because you can meditate on what you're going to
Okay.
do next. So the subject of music and these crystal bowls as a healing technique goes through the book. And here this says, Callie circled the rims of the bowls with a rubber wand, the vibrations building as they began to sing softly at first, then louder until they were singing in harmony. As more of the bowls joined in the song, the ellipses the vibrations created overlapped, crisscrossing as they passed over and through every surface they touched, vibrating and opening Emily's chakras. Okay, Callie is healing, or hoping to heal, one of the other characters. Yes. Callie joined the harmony, intoning the notes that were the universal vibrations of joy and gratitude, directing them with intention toward the unhealthy cells in Emily's body. So that being said, I would think we can start the singing, unless there's something else that you would like to make sure we cover.
No,
well, I don't know if we're going to sing.
Sounds pretty good. We won't. I won't sing.
We're not
the
singing.
bowl will sing.
The bowl will sing.
So I would be happy to do that. Shall I do it?
Yeah, please.
You may know these bowls from meditation.
Yeah, you can describe it a little more. I think we have about a minute left.
Okay.
Okay.
You may know these bowls from meditation, or there are little Tibetan singing bowls, the little brass ones that people play. And also, you know, if you've ever run your finger around a crystal glass, it makes the same vibration. But this is a vibration that has some healing capabilities and works directly on particular chakras.
And you yourself have been healed of asthma?
I have asthma, and I have two bowls. My massage therapist and my acupuncturist started using them on me, and I used to have to take steroids if I got a cold because the asthma was quite bad, and I haven't had to take them since. So if it's, you know, it's working for me. It's helping.
You. Well,
placebo or not, it's
let's
working.
Let's hear it.
Okay.
Ready? You have said that these vibrations that we are hearing now will last for as long, or might last for as long as 10 minutes.
They can.
Try it again.
Yes.
Go to it.
It's louder this time.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Thank you for bringing